Nina and Mark had just moved into an old countryside house outside of Michigan. It was quiet, surrounded by trees, and cheap, too cheap. They were excited, laughing while unpacking boxes. The house creaked a little, but they brushed it off. The real estate agent had said, "Ignore the basement. It's just storage." 3 days later, while looking for the fuse box, Nina found a small wooden door behind a shelf in the basement. It had no handle. She called Mark. Together, they moved the shelf, and Mark pried it open with a crowbar. Behind it was a narrow staircase going down. It didn't match the house blueprints. They went down slowly, phone flashlights on. The air was cold, like a refrigerator, and damp. At the bottom was a small, windowless room made of stone. In the center, an old iron chair with leather straps on the arms and legs. A dirty journal lay beside it. Nina opened the book. It was filled with handwritten notes, dates, and strange drawings. One line kept repeating, "The silence is not empty. It listens." Mark laughed nervously. "Creepy stuff. Let's get out of here." But as they turned, the door slammed shut. Their phones flickered and died. They banged on the door, yelled, but no one heard. Then they heard footsteps. Not from above, but from inside the room's walls. Suddenly, a small hole opened in the far wall. A whisper came through. "You shouldn't have come here." Hours later, they managed to escape when the door mysteriously creaked open. Shaken, they ran upstairs. The next morning, Nina visited an old man next door, Mr. Keller. When she mentioned the hidden room, his face turned pale. That house belonged to a man who experimented on people in the 60s. No one ever found the basement room. Some say it only appears to certain people. You unlocked it. Now it won't forget you. That night, as they tried to sleep, Nina woke up to soft tapping under the bed. Then a whisper, "The silence is listening." She turned to Mark. He was awake, eyes wide. He whispered, "It's in the walls again." The room grew cold, and from downstairs the sound of the hidden door slowly opening. Nina grabbed Mark's arm. "What do we do?" she whispered. Mark didn't answer. He sat up slowly, listening. Creak, creak. Footsteps on the stairs. But they weren't theirs. Nina reached for her phone to turn on the flashlight, but the screen stayed black.
Dead.
Mark slid off the bed and picked up the flashlight they had used earlier.
Click.
Nothing.
Dead too.
Suddenly, a low humming began, like a voice vibrating through the walls. It rose and fell like someone trying to speak without a mouth. Then, "Nina," it breathed from the hallway. A dry, distant voice. She froze. "That's my father's voice," she whispered, trembling. "But your dad's been dead for years," Mark said, backing toward the window. A sharp knock on the bedroom door. Then a whisper from the other side. "Open it or I will." Mark grabbed Nina's hand and pulled her away from the door. The knob slowly began to turn. Creak, creak. But it didn't open. Instead, the door breathed. It inhaled, the wood stretching like lungs under pressure. Then it exhaled. A blast of freezing air swept into the room through the cracks. From under the door, something dark began to slip in, like a shadow but thicker, moving with intention. Nina screamed. Mark yanked open the closet door. "In here, now." They both squeezed inside, shaking, barely fitting. Mark held the door with one hand. Nina covered her mouth. Then silence. Total. Until
tap, tap, tap.
From inside the closet. But not the door. From behind them, Nina turned, barely able to move in the tight space. Her breath caught in her throat, carved into the closet wall behind the coats, barely visible in the dark. The silence is listening. Suddenly, the wall behind them began to crack open. The cracking grew louder, like wood splitting under pressure. Nina turned fully, pushing coats aside, and froze. Behind the hanging clothes, a hidden panel in the wall had started to open on its own, revealing a narrow, pitch-black tunnel. Mark stared. That wasn't there before. From inside the tunnel, a voice whispered, dry and slow, "Come see what you forgot." Nina backed away, but the closet door slammed shut behind them. hard. They were trapped. Suddenly, a dim red glow began to pulse from inside the tunnel, revealing old, peeling wallpaper and something scratched onto the wood with fingernails. You shouldn't have come back. Mark looked at Nina. Back. You've never been here before, right? Nina didn't answer. Her face had gone pale. I don't remember, she whispered. Then the red glow shifted, revealing something deeper in the tunnel. A figure.
Thin. Tall.
Head tilted. Its arms were too long, its mouth too wide, and its eyes missing. It raised a hand, and in the voice of Nina's dead father, it said, "You left the door open, Nina. You let it follow you." Nina shook her head, backing away from the tunnel.
No.
I didn't. I locked it. I remember locking it. The figure in the tunnel began to move forward, slowly, unnaturally, its limbs bending in wrong directions. Mark grabbed the flashlight again, hit it hard against the wall, once, twice. It flickered on. He pointed it toward the tunnel. The figure vanished. Gone, just an empty tunnel. For a moment, silence returned. Then,
boom, boom, boom.
Something began slamming against the inside of the closet wall behind the tunnel. Harder each time. Nina screamed, "It's coming through." Suddenly, the light beam flickered again, then died. Darkness. Mark tried the closet door. It wouldn't budge. Nina was breathing fast, panicked. Then, from the darkness of the tunnel, a voice whispered, "You carried it here in your silence." A cold hand reached from the tunnel and touched Nina's shoulder. She turned. Nothing. But when she looked down, she saw it. A faint red handprint burned into her skin. Mark yelled, kicked the closet door with all his strength, once, twice. It burst open. They tumbled out into the bedroom, gasping. But the room was different now. The walls were bleeding words. In deep red, across every surface. The silence is listening. You let it in. It never left. And from downstairs, the sound of something heavy crawling up the stairs. Mark pulled Nina to her feet. "We have to leave, now." They ran out of the bedroom, down the dark hallway. Behind them, the crawling sound grew louder, wet, dragging and human. The stairs groaned as they descended, each step colder than the last. They reached the living room. But the front door was gone. Not locked, gone. Replaced by more wall, covered in the same red writing. "There's no way out," Nina whispered. Mark turned to the basement door. It stood wide open. That narrow staircase, still leading down into blackness. The air flowed from it like ice and breath. Then the crawling stopped. Silence. Until a voice came from behind them, low and calm, as if it had always been there. "You should have stayed quiet." Nina turned slowly. The figure was standing at the top of the stairs. Closer now. Clearer. No eyes. No mouth. Just a cracked, pale face and hands that twitched like they didn't belong to it. Mark stepped in front of Nina. "Stay behind me." The figure smiled without a mouth. Then whispered inside their minds. "It's not the house. It's you. You brought me back when you started remembering." Suddenly, the lights flickered on for the first time. They weren't in their home anymore. They were in a room with padded walls. A single flickering bulb. Old speakers in the ceiling. Nina turned. Mark was gone. She was alone. The speaker crackled. "Tell us again about the voices, Nina." Then silence. Then tapping under the floor. And again a whisper. "The silence is listening."